After tricking my husband into signing the divorce papers, I finally became the generous wife he always wanted. I no longer threw tantrums when he stayed out all night. I stopped making scenes when he paraded his little mistress around in public. He was finally satisfied with me, Alara. I'm glad you finally came to your senses. Don't worry, you'll always be the only Mrs. Montgomery. Nathaniel said it wasn't until his birthday gala that things changed. His mistress, Cassie, spotted the wedding ring on my finger and demanded I give it to her. The room went silent. Everyone knew that Nathaniel had designed and crafted that ring himself. I treated it like my very soul, never taking it off for a single second in 5 years. Even Nathaniel expected me to cause a scene this time. He stepped in immediately to protect his mistress. Cassie is just a bit spoiled. Don't take it to heart, he said. However, I just smiled. Fine. It's yours now. I slid the ring off and placed it on Cassie's finger. Nathaniel's expression darkened instantly. Are you really willing to give our wedding ring to Cassie? Nathaniel stared at me, his voice low and dangerous. The ring was a bit too large for Cassie's slender finger. I moved it to a different finger, for her not even bothering to look up at him. Yes, she likes it, doesn't she? It's just a ring. It's no big deal. After all, I was giving her Nathaniel himself. Why would I care about a piece of jewelry? My words seemed to trigger something in him. He slammed his wine glass onto the table. With a loud crash, let go of Cassie's waist and grabbed my wrist firmly. Alara, I thought you had moved past this. I didn't realize you were still trying to play the jealousy card. I was genuinely confused for a moment. Cassie wanted the ring, and I gave it to her without hesitation. Why did Nathaniel still think I was being a jealous wife? Perhaps the confusion in my eyes was too obvious. He let out a cold scoff. You're giving the ring to Cassie without a fight, just to get my attention, aren't you? Everyone knows how much you cherish that ring. You'd never give it away unless, of course, you don't love me anymore. He shrugged as he said the last part, his tone full of arrogance. He was absolutely certain that the idea of me not loving him was impossible. Too bad. He was wrong. I really didn't love him anymore. My silence was taken as a confirmation of his theory. He let go of my hand and stood up straight, his voice sounding a bit more cheerful. Fine, since Cassie has it, let her wear it for a while. When she gets bored with it, she'll give it back to you. Cassie leaned back into his arms like she had no bones, wiggling as she played with the ring. Don't worry, Alara, since Nathaniel said so, I won't keep it forever. She looked up at him with puppy dog eyes. But I want a ring too. Will you buy me a new one once it arrives? I'll give this one back to Alara. Nathaniel pinched her nose affectionately and promised he would. Watching their public display of affection felt like watching a bad movie. I felt nothing but a sense of irony. Did they think I was some kind of garbage collector? I shook my head slowly. No need to return it. I don't want it anymore. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes at me. Are you still throwing a fit? I told you it's just temporary for Cassie. I shook my head again. His face turned cold and his voice became icy. Fine, don't come crying to me for the ring later with that. He wrapped his arm around Cassie and walked away. Once they were gone, the guests started whispering. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I thought Mr. Montgomery finally settled down for her. I guess there's always a new girl, no kidding. They used to be so in love, but look at them now. Hearing the gossip made me feel a bit dazed. It was true, we started with so much passion, and now we had reached the point of divorce. Years ago, Nathaniel Montgomery was the most famous playboy in the city. His flings never lasted more than 3 months, but I, a regular college girl, somehow made him change his ways. He chased me for 2 whole years. During those years, he waited for me after class every day. Rain or shine, the rich boy who never lifted a finger actually made me ginger tea when I had cramps. When I was sick, he stayed by my bed night and day. His persistence for 2 years finally convinced me he loved me. I agreed to be his once we were official. He only had eyes for me. He never looked at another woman later. He knelt in front of his family estate for 3 days and nights without food or water just to marry me. I also endured the brutal Montgomery family hazing, which left my back scarred and bleeding. Just to be accepted as his wife, I thought we would be happy forever. But that happiness only lasted 4 years. 2 months ago, I walked in on him with another woman. I went hysterical and smashed everything in the room. Nathaniel just lit a cigarette and watched me through the smoke with a blank stare. Alara, I've been faithful to you for 6 years, that's enough. I'll keep your title as Mrs. Montgomery, but I'll keep my other women elsewhere. That was when I realized the whole reformed playboy thing was a lie. His suckled, deep love couldn't withstand the crave for something new. But I couldn't let go of 6 years of history. I started fighting with him, turning into a bitter, jealous woman. Then a week ago, he took Cassie to another party. I was furious when I found out and planned to hunt him down. Just as I got into my car, a sharp tearing pain hit my lower abdomen. I looked down. The seat was soaked in a large pool of dark red blood. My mind went blank. A thought I had never considered flashed through my brain. Was I pregnant? I gritted my teeth and called for an ambulance immediately. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed I was pregnant. Because of the emotional stress, I had lost the baby. I needed a procedure right away. My hands shook as I called Nathaniel. It took 18 calls before he finally picked up, his voice dripping with annoyance.
What are you screaming about now?
Before I could speak, I heard a woman's playful giggle in the background. The next second, the line went dead. That night, I lay alone on the operating table. I felt the tiny life leaving my body at that same moment. Every bit of love I had for Nathaniel was completely erased. 3 days later, the first thing I did after being discharged was find Nathaniel's mother to ask for a divorce. Are you sure you're willing to give up being a Montgomery? She asked. My hands instinctively covered my empty belly. Yes. Everyone thought marrying into the Montgomery family was the luckiest thing to happen to me. It was a massive step up in social status. But I never cared about their power or wealth. I married Nathaniel because I loved him. Now that the love was gone, being his wife was just a heavy chain. I desperately wanted to take it off the next day. His mother handed me the divorce papers Nathaniel had already signed. Even though we were married, the Montgomery family never liked my background. They were more than happy to help me leave. I picked up the pen and signed my name, letter by letter. From then on, I stopped being jealous. After all, I only had 1 month left before the divorce was final. Who Nathaniel spent his time with was no longer my business. The 3-tier birthday cake was soon rolled out. Nathaniel walked down from the 2nd floor with his arm around Cassie's waist. The woman's hair was messy and her lipstick was smudged. It wasn't hard to guess what they had been doing upstairs. Guests looked at me with a mix of mockery, disdain, and pity, but I just calmly took a sip of my juice. As a generous wife, I was supposed to look the other way. When it came time to cut the cake, Nathaniel naturally led Cassie forward. He shielded her with his arm, and they held the knife together to cut the first slice. Nathaniel, I want to spend every birthday with you from now on, okay? Cassie put a dab of frosting on his nose and looked at him with sparkling eyes. Nathaniel wasn't annoyed. He pulled her into his chest, his voice tender. Of course. Having you here is the best birthday gift I've ever received. I stood not far away watching the scene with a slight smirk. Once those sweet words and that affection belonged only to me, the gala wasn't over, but I had lost interest. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door, shutting out the noise. For the next few weeks, Nathaniel took Cassie all over the globe. From the mountains of Japan to the streets of London. From the ruins of Rome to the cathedrals of Italy. Every single stop was a place we had visited on our honeymoon. For years ago. Even the itinerary was exactly the same on his social media. He removed the wedding photo that had been pinned to the top of his profile for 4 years. It was replaced by a cozy photo of him and Cassie. Nathaniel really was passionate when he was in love. It wasn't until the final day of the divorce cooling off period that he finally returned. When he walked through the door with Cassie, I had just received the final divorce certificate. I was about to head upstairs to pack my things. Seeing me, Nathaniel actually looked a bit guilty. Usually, even when he was being blunt about his cheating, he was composed. Alara, Cassie is moving and starting today. Men's promises are truly worthless. The forever was a lie. The promise to never bring her home was also a lie. Thankfully, we were already divorced. Cassie could stay as long as she wanted. Fine, I'll go pack my things now. Finally, I could leave the Montgomery house. Nathaniel didn't expect me to be so calm. His expression was complicated. Isn't this the generous, understanding wife he always wanted? But seeing me like this, not shouting, not crying, made him feel uneasy. Quickly convinced himself that I was just being good, because I was afraid of losing him for good. He thought I was burying all my pain deep inside. Don't worry. Cassie is only staying for a few months. You're still the lady of this house. I froze at his sudden promise. Then a soft laugh escaped my throat. The lady of the house, not anymore.
Cassie
placed her hands on her stomach and spoke in a small, fragile voice. Alara, I'm not trying to take your place, but I'm carrying Nathaniel's first child. I can't take any risks. Once the baby is born safely, we'll leave. My eyes instinctively dropped to her stomach. Cassie was pregnant even though I didn't love Nathaniel anymore. My nails dug into my palms. A month ago, I lost my baby. Now Nathaniel already had a new one. Pain surged through my heart, not for Nathaniel, but for the child that no one but me knew had existed. Maybe the pain on my face was too obvious. Nathaniel immediately stepped in front of Cassie to shield her. We've been married for 4 years without a child. My family has been pressuring us constantly. Now that Cassie is pregnant, I can finally give them an answer. I forced the tears back and tried to keep my voice steady. I understand. Without waiting for their reaction, I turned and went upstairs. I packed all my personal belongings into a suitcase. As I was heading down, I ran into Cassie. She saw the suitcase and a glint of triumph flashed in her eyes, though she tried to sound concerned. "Oh, Alara, are you running away from home? I really won't steal Nathaniel from you don't have to. Nathaniel isn't here, you don't have to put on an act," interrupted. She was young and her ambition was written all over her face. Only a man blinded by lust like Nathaniel wouldn't see it. Seeing I had called her out, she dropped the act and put on a haughty expression. "Your tactics have improved. Playing hard to get to make Nathaniel soft-hearted, huh?" I frowned. Nathaniel and I are already divorced. A look of pure joy erupted on Cassie's face. But a second later, she looked at me suspiciously. "Divorced you? Just give up the title of Mrs. Montgomery, like that. I don't believe you. You're just lying to make me lower my guard, aren't you?" I didn't understand why everyone's first reaction to me getting a divorce was disbelief. I was about to pull out the certificate. Cassie's expression turned cold. "I don't believe you'd ever agree to a divorce. I'll have to take matters into my own hands." Before I could react, she suddenly threw herself backward and let out a piercing scream. Nathaniel happened to be coming up the stairs. He caught her just in time, his face full of panic. "Cassie, are you okay?" Cassie shrank into his arms, her eyes red. "Nathaniel, I just wanted to tell Alara that I try my best to get along with her. But she tried to push me down the stairs." He touched her stomach with trembling hands, looking terrified almost. "Our baby was almost gone." Nathaniel snapped his head toward me, his eyes burning with disappointment and rage. "Alara, I thought you had changed, but it was all an act. You actually try to hurt my child. How can you be so vicious? Even if the love was gone. We spent 6 years together. Didn't he know who I was? I didn't push her. There are cameras in the hallway. You can." "Enough," Nathaniel barked, cutting me off. His eyes were cold as ice. "Would Cassie risk her own baby just to frame you? You've never been a mother, so you have no idea how much a child means to a woman." I bit my lower lip so hard I could taste blood. How could I not know? The pain of losing a child was something I knew all too well. "Since you still can't accept reality, then get out of this house. Don't come back until you've come to your senses." He picked Cassie up and rushed out of the door. I watched them leave and swallowed the explanation stuck in my throat. I closed my eyes. Fine, but if I left now, I was never coming back. I placed the divorce certificate on the coffee table after a pause. I pulled the hospital record of my miscarriage from my bag. I tucked it under the divorce certificate. Finally, I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the home that was once mine. I never looked back. The heavy iron gates of the Montgomery estate clicked shut behind me, the sound metallic and final. It was raining. The cold autumn drizzle fell in a thin, gray sheet, washing over the manicured lawns and the marble fountains that had once felt like the boundaries of my golden cage. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. The cold water on my face felt incredibly clean, dripping down my cheeks and washing away the phantom scent of Nathaniel's expensive cologne and Cassie's sickly sweet perfume. I dragged my single, battered suitcase down the long, winding driveway. It was the same suitcase I had brought with me 5 years ago when I first moved into this house as a naive 22-year-old, believing that love could conquer any social divide. Back then, the trunk of Nathaniel's sports car had been stuffed with designer dresses he had bought to replace my commoner wardrobe. Today, I left all of those behind. They belonged to Mrs. Montgomery, a character I was no longer playing. I walked until I reached the main road, where the streetlights cast long, shivering reflections on the wet asphalt. I pulled out my phone and ordered a ride. While waiting, I looked down at my bare left hand. For 5 years, a thick, pale band of skin had lived beneath the heavy platinum wedding ring Nathaniel had designed for me. Now, exposed to the cold air, that pale skin felt raw, but incredibly light. When the taxi arrived, the driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering on my damp hair and the single suitcase. "Rough night, miss." "No," I said, looking out the window as the gates of the Montgomery estate vanished into the rainy gloom. "Actually, it's the best night of my life." The taxi took me to a small, older apartment complex on the outer edge of the city. I had leased it 2 weeks ago under my maiden name, Alara I'm. It was small, just a single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that smelled faintly of old pine, but it was mine. I had paid the deposit with the small savings I had kept from my college tutoring days, money I had never let the Montgomery family touch. I hauled my suitcase up the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment was empty save for a simple mattress on the floor, a single wooden chair, and a cardboard box containing a few of my old sketchbooks. I sat down on the mattress, pulled my knees to my chest, and listened to the rain tap against the window pane. For the first time in 5 years, my chest didn't ache with the tight, suffocating pressure of anxiety. There was no waiting up until 3 a.m. for the sound of a sports car in the driveway. There was no scanning social media for leaked photos of my husband with foreign models. There was only the quiet. And for now, the quiet was enough. Back at the Montgomery mansion, the silence that followed Alara's departure was thick and heavy. Nathaniel stood in the grand foyer, his hand still resting on Cassie's shoulder. She was trembling, her head buried in his chest, her small hands clutching his lapels. "She's gone, Nathaniel," Cassie whimpered, her voice cracking with theatrical terror. "She actually tried to push me. If you hadn't come up the stairs when you did, our baby." Nathaniel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the empty hallway where Alara had stood just moments ago. Her expression had been so completely devoid of anger, of jealousy, of anything. For years, he had been accustomed to her fire. Even when she was being generous, over the past month, he had assumed it was a calculated silent treatment, a performance designed to make him feel guilty. But the way she had looked at him just now, it wasn't the look of a woman playing a game. It was the look of a stranger looking at a nuisance. "Nathaniel?" Cassie whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "My stomach hurts a little. Can we go to the hospital? Just to be safe." "Right," Nathaniel said, his voice unusually flat. "The hospital. Let's go." The drive to the private clinic was silent. Nathaniel gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. In the passenger seat, Cassie kept glancing at him, her fingers nervously twisting the platinum wedding ring she had taken from Alara. The ring was far too loose. It kept spinning, the heavy diamond drooping toward her palm. At the clinic, the Montgomery family's private obstetrician, Dr. Harrison, received them immediately. After a thorough ultrasound and examination, Dr. Harrison stepped out of the room to speak with Nathaniel. "How is the baby?" Nathaniel asked, his throat dry.
Dr.
Harrison adjusted his glasses, looking at the charts in his hand with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Montgomery, are you certain about the timeline of Miss Cassie's pregnancy?" Nathaniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "According to her blood tests and the ultrasound, she is barely 4 weeks pregnant," Dr. Harrison said carefully. "Furthermore, there are absolutely no signs of physical trauma or distress. She claims she was almost pushed down a flight of stairs, but her heart rate, blood pressure, and uterine tone are completely normal. In fact, she seems highly alert, almost performative." Nathaniel's chest tightened. For weeks ago, he had been in London with Cassie. But he also remembered the sheer terror in Cassie's eyes when she claimed Alara pushed her. He shook his head, trying to clear the sudden, nagging doubt. "Just monitor her. Make sure she's safe." "Of course, Dr. Harrison said. "But Mr. Montgomery, if I may ask, how's Alara?" "I haven't seen her since her discharge." Nathaniel froze. "Her discharge?
What are you talking about?"
Dr. Harrison blinked in surprise. "You don't know? A month ago, Alara was admitted to our emergency wing. She was hemorrhaging severely. It was a spontaneous miscarriage. She was about 8 weeks pregnant." The corridor of the hospital seemed to tilt. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. A miscarriage? Alara was pregnant." "Yes," Dr. Harrison said, his tone turning grave and slightly accusatory. "She was brought in by ambulance. She was in severe emotional and physical distress. We tried to contact you, Mr. Montgomery. The hospital protocol requires the spouse's signature for emergency procedures when the patient is semi-conscious. Our staff called your private number repeatedly, but there was no response. In the end, Alara signed the consent forms herself." The doctor's words echoed in Nathaniel's mind, each syllable striking like a physical blow. A month ago,
He remembered that night.
he had been at a VIP lounge in the city, celebrating Cassie's birthday. His phone had buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He had seen Alara's caller ID flashing on the screen, 10 times, 15 times, 18 times. He had been so annoyed by her nagging that he had finally picked up, barked a harsh reprimand, and hung up when he heard Cassie laughing beside him. He had switched his phone to Do Not Disturb for the rest of the night. "She was losing our baby," Nathaniel thought, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. "She was lying on an operating table, bleeding, and I hung up on her." "Where is she now?" Dr. Harrison asked, interrupting his spiral. "She missed her follow-up appointment last week." Nathaniel couldn't speak. He turned on his heel and walked away, ignoring Cassie's voice calling out to him from the examination room. He drove back to the estate like a madman, his tires screeching on the wet pavement. He burst through the front doors, ignoring the housekeeper who tried to greet him, and ran straight to the living room. There, on the dark mahogany coffee table, sat 2 documents. He picked up the first one. It was a gold-embossed folder containing a final, legally binding divorce certificate. His mother's signature was on the witness line, and Alara's signature was at the bottom, neat, precise, and completely devoid of hesitation. The date of the final decree was today. They were divorced. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a bluff. She had legally ended their marriage without him even realizing the process had begun. With trembling hands, Nathaniel picked up the second piece of paper. It was a crumpled hospital discharge summary from the private clinic, dated exactly 1 month ago. At the bottom, in the space for emergency contact/spouse, the line was left blank. Instead, under the patient's signature, Alara had written her name in shaky, uneven handwriting that broke his heart. Beside the paper lay a small, black velvet box. Inside was the simple silver bracelet he had bought her for $50 during their college days, the only piece of jewelry she had kept from before they were rich. She had left everything. The designer clothes, the luxury cars, the mansion, the money. She had left him. Nathaniel sank onto the sofa, the papers clutching in his fist, and let out a choked, desperate sound that echoed through the empty, silent house. "Sir, we've pulled the footage." The security chief of the Montgomery estate stood nervously in Nathaniel's study. It was 3 a.m. Nathaniel sat behind his desk, a glass of untouched whiskey sitting in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot, his collar undone. "Play it," Nathaniel commanded, his voice hoarse. The security chief tapped his tablet, and the feed from the second-floor hallway security camera appeared on the monitor. The footage showed Alara carrying her suitcase out of her bedroom. She looked pale, her shoulders slightly hunched, but her expression was entirely calm. As she reached the top of the grand staircase, Cassie emerged from the guest room, blocking her path. Because the cameras didn't record audio, the exchange was a silent movie, but the body language spoke volumes. Cassie was speaking rapidly, her face contorted in a sneer that Nathaniel had never seen on her sweet, innocent face before. Alara stood perfectly still, her hand resting on the handle of her suitcase, her expression indifferent. Then, Cassie stepped closer, her eyes darting toward the staircase behind her. She reached out, grabbed Alara's arm, and then, with a sudden, violent backward leap, threw herself toward the stairs. Alara hadn't moved. Her hands had been on her suitcase the entire time. She hadn't pushed Cassie. She hadn't even touched her. Cassie had deliberately flung herself backward, relying on the fact that Nathaniel was walking up the stairs at that exact moment to catch her. Nathaniel watched the footage play over and over. He watched Cassie's calculated fall, her terrified expression flipping like a switch the moment his face appeared in the frame. He watched his own self-righteous fury as he screamed at Alara, pointing his finger at her, calling her vicious. He remembered Alara's eyes in that moment. There had been no anger, no defense. Just a deep, profound exhaustion. "I didn't push her. There are cameras in the hallway, you can—" "Enough," he had barked, cutting her off. Nathaniel closed his eyes, a wave of intense self-loathing washing over him. He had believed a woman he had known for a few months over the woman who had endured the brutal Montgomery family hazing for him, who had scarred her back for him, who had loved him when he was nothing but a reckless boy. "Get out," Nathaniel whispered to the security chief. "Sir, get out." Nathaniel roared, slamming his hand onto the desk, sending the whiskey glass flying. It shattered against the marble fireplace, the amber liquid staining the stone. The chief scrambled out of the room, shutting the door behind him. Nathaniel buried his face in his hands. He tried to call Alara's phone again. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." He called his mother. It took several rings before Eleanor Montgomery answered, her voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. "Nathaniel? Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Why did you do it?" Nathaniel demanded, his voice shaking. "Why did you help her get a divorce behind my back?" Eleanor sighed, a sound of elegant boredom. "Because she asked for it, Nathaniel. And quite frankly, she was never fit to be a Montgomery. Her background was middle class, her family had no connections, and she refused to play the role of a proper society wife. When she came to me asking for a quiet exit, I was more than happy to oblige. I had our lawyers draw up the papers. You signed those blank corporate asset transfer documents last month, remember? We simply routed the divorce filing through those. It was clean, quick, and she didn't ask for a single dime of our estate. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" Nathaniel's voice cracked. "She was pregnant, Mother. She lost my child because I wasn't there." There was a brief pause on the line, but Eleanor's tone remained cold. "Then it's a blessing in disguise. A child from a woman like her would only complicate the succession. Besides, doesn't your little mistress have one on the way? That's much easier to manage." "Cassie lied to me," Nathaniel whispered, the realization finally settling deep into his bones. "She lied about everything, and I let her drive Alara away." "Nathaniel, don't be dramatic," Eleanor said sharply. "You are a Montgomery. Women are replaceable. Go back to sleep." She hung up. Nathaniel stared at the dead phone. He felt a sudden, terrifying emptiness. For 6 years, he had operated under the assumption that Alara's love was a permanent fixture in his life, something he could neglect, abuse, and ignore, but which would always be there when he decided to return. He had thought he was the one in control. But as he looked at the empty, dark study, he realized the truth. Alara hadn't just left the house. She had erased him from her life entirely. 6 months later. The spring air in the city was crisp and filled with the scent of blooming magnolias. Far away from the high society circles of the Montgomery family, a small, elegant boutique had opened in the trendy design district. The sign above the door read, simply, Vance. Inside, the space was minimalist and beautiful. Warm wooden shelves held delicate, handcrafted jewelry, pieces made of raw silver, deep green jade, and unpolished opals. Unlike the flashy, massive diamonds favored by the Montgomery estate, these pieces had a quiet, soulful elegance. I stood behind the counter, polishing a pair of silver drop earrings. I wore a simple cream-colored linen shirt and wide-leg trousers. My hair, which I used to keep in a tight, perfect bun to please Eleanor Montgomery, now fell in soft, natural waves around my shoulders. Alara, the shipment of blue chalcedony just arrived, my assistant Mia called out from the back room. They're absolutely stunning. Perfect for the new summer line. Bring them out, Mia. Let's take a look, I said, smiling. Over the past 6 months, I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. Before I met Nathaniel, I had been a top student in the university's jewelry design program. I had given up my dreams because the Montgomerys believed a daughter-in-law running a commercial boutique was vulgar and cheap. After the divorce, I used my small savings to rent a tiny studio. I worked 18 hours a day, pouring all my grief, my pain, and my newly found freedom into my designs. When a prominent fashion influencer stumbled into my shop and posted about my raw, emotional pieces, the boutique took off. Now, Vance was becoming one of the most talked-about independent brands in the city. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from my lawyer confirming that the last of the legal separation details had been completed. I had refused any alimony, any property, any settlement. The only thing I kept was my freedom. Suddenly, the bell above the shop door chimed. "Welcome to Vance," Mia said from the back. I looked up, a polite professional smile on my lips, but the smile froze. Standing in the doorway was Nathaniel. He looked shockingly different from the arrogant, immaculate playboy I had left 6 months ago. He had lost weight, his cheekbones sharp and hollow. His expensive suit looked slightly loose on him, and there were dark, heavy shadows beneath his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "Alara," he whispered. His voice was cracked, his eyes wide and trembling as he looked at me. It was as if he were looking at a ghost. I kept my composure. I didn't let my hands shake. I carefully set the silver earrings down on the velvet tray. "Mr. Montgomery," I said, my voice cool, polite, and completely empty of emotion. "Welcome to my shop. Are you looking for a gift? Perhaps for Miss Cassie?" Nathaniel winced, as if my words had physically cut him. He took a step forward, his hands reaching out instinctively, but he stopped himself when he saw the cold, distant barrier in my eyes. "Alara, please don't call me that," he pleaded. "I've been looking for you for 6 months. Your friends wouldn't tell me anything. Your lawyer blocked all my calls. I only found out about the shop because of the Design magazine feature yesterday. I took measures to ensure my privacy," I said calmly. "If you are not here to purchase jewelry, I must ask you to leave. I am running a business." "I don't care about the jewelry." Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes brimming with tears. "Alara, I know. I know everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the baby." His voice broke, and a tear finally escaped, rolling down his hollow cheek. "Dr. Harrison told me. I know you were pregnant. I know you lost our baby the night I hung up on you. Alara, I swear to God, if I had known." "If you had known what?" I interrupted him, my voice steady, devoid of the hysterical anger I used to have. "Would you have picked up the phone on the first call instead of the 18th? Would you have left your mistress's birthday party? Or would you have just sent your assistant to sign the forms for you?" "I would have been there," he cried, his hands trembling. "I loved you, Alara. I was a fool, I was blind, I was arrogant, but I loved you." "No, Nathaniel," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You didn't love me. You loved the idea of a reformed playboy who had a devoted, pathetic wife waiting for him at home while he ran wild. You loved having a woman so desperate for your attention that she would scar her own body and destroy her own dignity, just to keep your name." "I kicked Cassie out," he said desperately, trying to find some leverage, some way to reach me. "The day after you left, I checked the security cameras. I saw what she did. She lied about the stairs. She lied about the pregnancy timeline. I kicked her out of the estate. I've cut off her allowance. I've had my lawyers handle her. She's gone, Alara.
She means nothing to me.
I haven't touched another woman since the day you left." I looked at him, and to my own surprise, I felt absolutely nothing.
No satisfaction, no bitter joy, no lingere resentment.
Just a profound, peaceful indifference. "That's good for you, Nathaniel," I said softly. "But what you do with Cassie, or any other woman, has nothing to do with me. We are divorced." We can remarry, he begged, stepping up to the counter, his hands gripping the polished wood. I'll sign a prenuptial agreement giving you everything. I'll publicly apologize. I'll make sure my mother kneels before you to ask for forgiveness. Just come back to me, Alara. Please. The house is so empty. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see your empty ring finger. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It wasn't bitter. It was the laugh of someone who had finally woken up from a long, terrible nightmare. Nathaniel, do you remember what you said to me on your birthday gala? I asked. You said, you're giving the ring to Cassie without a fight just to get my attention, aren't you? Everyone knows how much you cherish that ring. Nathaniel lowered his head, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I did cherish that ring. I continued, my voice gentle but unyielding. I cherished it because I thought it represented 6 years of shared history and a love that had survived everything. But when I slid it off my finger and gave it to Cassie, I wasn't playing a game. I was giving up. I realized that the man I loved had died a long time ago, or maybe he never existed at all. I'm still here, he whispered, looking up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. I can be that man again. I swear I can. You can't, I said. And more importantly, I don't want you to be. I like who I am now. I don't have to walk on eggshells. I don't have to endure your family's cruelty. I don't have to mourn a baby alone in a cold hospital room while my husband is out with another woman. I leaned forward slightly, looking him directly in his bloodshot eyes. I am happy, Nathaniel. For the first time in 5 years, I am genuinely happy. If you ever loved me, even a little bit, you will respect that. You will walk out of the shop, and you will never come back. Nathaniel stared at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of the old Alara who would have melted at his tears. But he found nothing. Only the solid, unbreakable wall of a woman who had completely moved on. Slowly, his hands slipped off the counter. His shoulders slumped, and he looked smaller, weaker, and older than I had ever seen him. You really don't love me anymore, he whispered, the truth finally sinking in, heavy and irreversible. I don't, I said. He stood there for a long moment, the silence in the shop stretching between us like an ocean. Finally, he gave a slow, defeated nod. He turned around and walked toward the door. His footsteps were heavy, dragging, as if he were carrying the weight of all his regrets on his shoulders. As his hand touched the doorknob, he paused. He didn't turn around, but his voice was quiet and choked. I'm sorry, Alara. For everything. Thank you, I said. Goodbye, Nathaniel. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the bright spring sunshine. I watched his tall figure walk down the street, disappearing into the crowd of bustling people until he was completely gone. 2 months later, the annual City Design Awards were held at the Grand Plaza Hotel. It was the most prestigious event of the year for the creative elite. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, flowing champagne, and high society gossip. For years, I had attended this exact gala as Nathaniel's +1, standing quietly by his side in silent, uncomfortable designer gowns, smiling politely while his business associates ignored me and their wives whispered about my common origins behind their fans. Tonight, I was attending under my own name. Vance had been nominated for the Emerging Designer of the Year award. I wore a stunning emerald green silk gown of my own design, with a high collar and an open back that proudly displayed my scars. For years, I had tried to hide those scars, feeling ashamed of the brutal hazing the Montgomery family had put me through. Tonight, I wore them as a badge of survival. They were the proof of the fire I had walked through to get to where I was today. Alara, you look magnificent, said Julian Vance, my older brother, who had flown in from the coast to be my date. He adjusted his bow tie, smiling warmly at me. Are you nervous? A little, I admitted, taking a sip of mineral water. But mostly, I'm just happy to be here on my own terms. You deserve this, sis. You've worked harder than anyone I know. As we walked into the main ballroom, the whispers began. But this time, they weren't the cruel, mocking whispers of the past. Is that Alara Vance? The designer behind the Vance brand. She looks incredible. Have you seen her new collection? It sold out in 3 hours. I heard she used to be married to Nathaniel Montgomery. What a fool he was to let her go. I kept my head held high, smiling and greeting colleagues as we made our way to our table. As the evening progressed, I felt a familiar gaze on me. I turned my head slightly and saw Nathaniel sitting at a table near the front. He was accompanied by his mother, Eleanor, who looked as cold and aristocratic as ever. Nathaniel was staring at me. He was dressed in his usual flawless tuxedo, but his face was pale, and his eyes were filled with a deep, haunting sorrow. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He gave me a small, hesitant nod, his eyes lingering on my open back, on the scars he knew all too well. Sitting a few tables away from him was Cassie. She had managed to get an invitation through some minor social connection, but she was sitting alone. She looked desperate. She had tried to dress in a lavish, over-the-top gown, but she was excluded from the main circles. Her eyes darted between Nathaniel and me, her face contorted with envy and bitterness. And now, for the emerging designer of the year, the presenter on stage announced, their voice echoing through the microphone. The room quieted. The nominees' designs flashed on the giant screens. My raw silver and emerald collection, titled Rebirth, was shown last. The winner is Alara Vance, for Vance. The ballroom erupted into applause. Julian hugged me tightly. Go get it, sis. I stood up, smoothing down my emerald gown, and walked up the steps to the stage. The spotlight followed me, warm and bright. As I took the heavy crystal trophy from the presenter, I looked out at the audience. I saw Eleanor Montgomery looking at me, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. I saw Cassie gripping her wine glass, so tightly I thought it would shatter. And I saw Nathaniel, his eyes shining with tears, clapping slowly and looking at me with a mixture of intense pride and devastating regret. I stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, I said, my voice clear and confident, echoing through the grand hall. 5 years ago, I thought my worth was defined by the name I carried and the approval of others. I thought that to love meant to sacrifice everything, my dreams, my voice, and my own dignity. The room was dead silent. Everyone knew the history between the Montgomery family and me. But I was wrong. I continued, looking directly at the table where Nathaniel sat. True love doesn't require you to minimize yourself. True strength isn't about enduring pain in silence. It's about having the courage to walk away when the love is gone, and having the strength to rebuild yourself from the ashes. This award isn't just for my designs. It's for my freedom. Thank you. The applause that followed was deafening. I held the trophy high, a bright, genuine smile on my face. As the gala wound down, I stepped out onto the terrace to catch some fresh air. The city skyline stretched out before me, a sea of glittering lights under the dark night sky. Alara. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Nathaniel, I said, looking out at the city. I ask you not to contact me. I know, he said, stepping onto the terrace. He stood a respectful distance away, his hands in his pockets. I didn't come to beg you to come back. I know that's over. I wanted to congratulate you. Your speech was beautiful. Your designs, they truly have a soul. Thank you, I said. I deserve everything you said, he whispered, his voice cracking. I let my mother look down on you. I let Cassie ruin what we had. I ignored you when you needed me most. I will spend the rest of my life living with the knowledge that I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Don't do that, Nathaniel, I said, turning to look at him. Don't play the tragic martyr. It doesn't suit you. You made your choices. I made mine. We both have to live with them. Before he could answer, the glass doors of the terrace burst open. Cassie stood there, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes wild. She had a glass of red wine in her hand, and she was glaring at me with pure hatred. You think you're so smart, don't you, Alara? She shrieked, her voice drawing the attention of the guests near the doors. You think you're some kind of queen because you won a stupid award? You're nothing but a commoner who got lucky. Cassie, shut up and get out. Nathaniel snapped, his voice cold and dangerous as he stepped between her and me. No, Nathaniel. Why should I? Cassie cried, tears of frustration streaming down her face. You kicked me out for her. You cut me off. You ruined my life. And for what? For a woman who doesn't even want you? She divorced you. She threw your precious wedding ring on my finger like it was garbage. Because it was garbage, I said calmly, stepping out from behind Nathaniel. Cassie froze, her mouth open. The ring was just metal and stones, Cassie, I said, my voice cool and level. Just like Nathaniel was just a man. I gave them both to you because I didn't need them anymore. If you found out they were worthless, that's your problem, not mine. You bitch. Cassie screamed, raising her arm to fling the red wine at my emerald dress. But before she could, Nathaniel grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, his face contorted in a cold, ruthless anger that I had once feared, but now found entirely pathetic. Don't touch her, Nathaniel hissed. If you ever come near Alara again, if you ever speak her name, I will make sure you and your family are completely ruined in this city. Do you understand me? I have the security footage of you framing her. I have the medical records proving your fraud. I can destroy you with a single phone call. Cassie shrank back, the terror in her eyes real this time. She dropped the wine glass, the red liquid splashing across the marble floor like blood. She looked at Nathaniel, then at me, and finally realized she had lost everything. She turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically on the stone. Nathaniel let out a long, ragged breath. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. Are you okay? I'm perfectly fine, Nathaniel, I said, not a single hair on my head out of place. But you should go inside. Your mother is waiting for you. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound, aching despair. He realized that even when he defended me, even when he protected me, it didn't move me. I didn't need his protection. I didn't need his wealth. I didn't need him at all. Goodbye, Alara, he whispered. Goodbye, Nathaniel. He turned and walked back into the glittering ballroom, leaving me alone on the terrace. I looked out at the city skyline. The air was cool and sweet. The weight of the past 5 years was completely gone, leaving only the endless, beautiful potential of the future. I took a deep breath, smiled to myself, and walked back inside to join my brother, my friends, and the life I had fought so hard to reclaim.